The morning of my wedding dawned crisp and golden, the kind of October day that makes you believe in fairy tales. I stood before the mirror in the bridal suite of the historic manor house, my heart hammering with joy as my maid of honor, Sarah, fastened the last pearl button on my grandmother's vintage lace dress. After 3 years of deployment separations, canceled dates, and uncertain video calls across time zones, Marcus and I were finally getting married. According to YouTube analytics, 99.3% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, you'll help support the channel and never miss fresh content. "You look absolutely radiant, Em," Sarah whispered, tears already threatening her carefully applied mascara. "Marcus is going to lose his mind when he sees you." I couldn't stop smiling. My Marine pilot fiancé had returned from his final deployment just 2 months ago, and we'd thrown ourselves into wedding planning with the intensity of people who'd waited too long for their happily ever after. Everything was perfect. Almost. A sharp knock interrupted my reverie. "Emma? Can I come in?" My brother Jake's voice carried through the door, slightly slurred despite it being barely noon. Sarah and I exchanged glances. Jake had been drinking at the rehearsal dinner last night, making increasingly bitter comments about my relationship with Marcus. Growing up, Jake had always been protective of me, but lately, his behavior had become erratic and resentful. "Sure, come in," I called, smoothing my dress nervously. Jake stumbled through the door, his groomsman tuxedo already wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot and unfocused. The smell of whiskey hit me like a physical blow. "Jake, what are you doing?" "The ceremony starts in an hour." He swayed slightly, fixing me with a look I'd never seen before. Equal parts pain and rage. "Had to talk to you before you make the biggest mistake of your life, Em." "Jake, please." "Not today. Whatever this is about." "It's about your precious Marcus," he spat, pulling out his phone with unsteady hands. "Your perfect Marine hero. You want to know what your husband-to-be was really doing on his last deployment?" My blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" "See, I've got friends overseas too. Military contractors. They sent me some interesting photos." His fingers swiped across the screen, and he thrust the phone toward me with malicious satisfaction. The images hit me like physical blows. Marcus in civilian clothes, his arm around a beautiful blonde woman at what looked like a beach bar. The same woman laughing as he spun her around on a dance floor. Another photo of them walking hand in hand down a moonlit beach. The final image made my knees weak. Marcus kissing her passionately outside what appeared to be a hotel. The photos are timestamped, Em. 3 months ago, while he was telling you he was too busy with missions to video chat. While you were planning this wedding like some pathetic fool. The room spun around me. Sarah grabbed my arm, steadying me as I processed what I was seeing. My perfect love story, my fairy tale ending, all of it crumbling in, real time. "Jake, where did you get these?" Sarah demanded, her voice sharp with suspicion. "Does it matter?" He sneered. "What matters is that Emma's about to marry a cheating bastard, and I'm the only one with the balls to tell her the truth." I stared at the photos, my mind racing. Something felt wrong about this, beyond the obvious wrongness of seeing your fiancé with another woman. The lighting, the casual clothes, the setting. None of it matched what I knew about Marcus's deployment location. "Jake, these could be what? Fake?" He laughed bitterly. "You're so desperate to marry Captain America that you'd rather believe I'm lying than accept the truth about your precious Marcus. That's not—" His hand moved faster than I could react. The slap echoed through the bridal suite like a gunshot, spinning my head to the side and sending me stumbling backward. Sarah screamed. The taste of blood filled my mouth as my lips split against my teeth. "Jake!" Sarah lunged at him, but he was already backing toward the door. "Maybe now you'll listen to reason," he snarled. "Call off this wedding, Em." before you embarrass yourself any further." He was gone before I could respond, leaving me holding my bleeding lip, my perfect wedding makeup ruined, and my heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. Sarah immediately went into crisis mode, pressing a cold cloth to my lip while frantically texting the makeup artist. "We can fix this, Em. The swelling will go down. We can cover the bruise." "How can I walk down that aisle?" I whispered, staring at my reflection. The left side of my face was already beginning to swell, a red handprint clearly visible against my pale skin. "How can I marry Marcus knowing what I know?" "Because you don't know anything yet," Sarah said firmly. "Those photos could be fake, or old, or taken out of context. You know Marcus. You know his character. Don't let Jake destroy your happiness with some grainy cell phone pictures." But doubt had already taken root. Marcus had been distant during his last deployment, their video calls sporadic and brief. He'd explained it away as mission requirements, classified operations that kept him busy. What if it had all been lies? 20 minutes later, the makeup artist had worked her magic, concealing the worst of the damage with strategic contouring and a bold red lip that masked the split. I looked almost normal, if you didn't know what to look for. The wedding coordinator knocked softly. "Emma? We're ready for you, darling." I stood on shaking legs, taking Sarah's offered arm. "I can't do this." "Yes, you can. Walk down that aisle. Look into Marcus's eyes. You'll know the truth when you see him." The processional music began, and suddenly I was moving down the petal-strewn aisle, past the blur of smiling faces, toward the altar where Marcus waited. He looked devastatingly handsome in his dress blues, the afternoon sunlight catching the gold of his aviator wings and the ribbons on his chest. When he saw me, his face lit up with such pure, overwhelming joy that my steps faltered. This was the man who had held me through panic attacks during his deployments, who had talked me through law school finals from half a world away, who had never once made me doubt his love. Until today. Then I caught sight of Jake standing with the other groomsmen, and his smug, satisfied expression sent fresh rage coursing through my veins. The ceremony proceeded in a blur. I spoke my vows mechanically, barely hearing my own voice over the pounding of my heart. When Marcus lifted my veil for our first kiss as husband and wife, I saw the exact moment he noticed my injuries. His hands cupped my face gently, his thumb tracing the fading red mark on my cheek with surgical precision. His blue eyes, usually warm and laughing, went arctic cold. "Who?" he whispered against my lips, so quietly only I could hear. I couldn't answer. Couldn't bring myself to say Jake's name. Not here. Not now. The reception was torture. I smiled and laughed and danced, playing the part of the blissful bride while Jake watched from across the room with vindictive satisfaction. Every time someone complimented how radiant I looked, how perfect everything was, how lucky Marcus and I were, I felt like I was living a lie. Marcus tried repeatedly to get me alone, to ask about my injuries, but there were always more photos to take, more hands to shake, more well-wishers to acknowledge. I could see the tension building in his shoulders, the way his jaw tightened every time he caught sight of Jake. Finally, during the dinner service, Marcus stood to give his speech. I expected the usual heartfelt words about love and commitment and our future together. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small device, a portable projector. "Before I talk about my beautiful wife," he began, his voice carrying easily across the suddenly silent reception hall, "I want to share something with all of you. A little slideshow about trust, loyalty, and the importance of family." My stomach dropped. What was he doing? The lights dimmed, and suddenly, the wall behind the head table was filled with an image that made me gasp. It was one of Jake's photos, Marcus with the blonde woman at the beach bar. But this version was different, clearer, and dated not 3 months ago, but 3 years ago. This is a photo of me with my friend Katie Thompson, Marcus said conversationally. Katie's husband, Staff Sergeant Mike Thompson, is one of my best friends. This was taken during shore leave in 2022, before Emma and I were even engaged. Katie and Mike's anniversary party, if memory serves. Another image appeared. The same beach, the same bar. But now showing the full scene. The blonde woman, Katie, standing between Marcus and a tall, dark-haired man in military uniform. All three of them laughing, drinks raised in a toast. Here's the full photo, with Katie's husband Mike. Funny. How cropping can change the entire story, isn't it? The room was dead silent except for the soft whir of the projector. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears as Marcus clicked to the next image, the dance floor photo, but again, showing the full scene. It wasn't a romantic dance at all, but a group celebration, with at least a dozen people visible in the background, including the same uniformed man who was clearly Katie's husband. This is from Mike's promotion party. I was dancing with his wife while he was getting congratulated by the commanding officer. Pretty innocent stuff. Jake's face had gone white across the room. He was edging toward the exit, but Marcus wasn't finished. And this final photo? Marcus clicked once more, and the image of him kissing the blonde woman filled the wall. But this version showed what Jake's cropped photo had hidden. It wasn't a passionate kiss at all, but Marcus giving Katie a friendly peck on the cheek while her husband looked on, laughing. A goodbye kiss for a friend's wife as they headed back to base. Mike took this photo himself and sent it to Emma at the time because he thought it was funny how formal I was being. Marcus set down the projector remote and fixed Jake with a stare that could have melted steel. Now, I have to ask, who would go through the trouble of obtaining legitimate photos from military contractors, then crop and manipulate them to make them look incriminating? Who would bring these fake images to my bride on our wedding day? Who would... His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper that somehow carried throughout the silent room. Strike my wife hard enough to split her lip and leave bruises on her face? The entire reception turned as one to stare at Jake, who was now pressed against the back wall like a cornered animal. Jake Miller, Marcus continued, his voice now carrying the full authority of his military rank. You have exactly 30 seconds to explain to me why you assaulted my wife and tried to destroy our marriage with fabricated evidence. I didn't. Jake stammered, but his guilt was written across his face in bold letters. 20 seconds. Jake's composure cracked completely. She was going to marry you, he shouted, desperation making his voice shrill. She was going to move to your base, follow you around the world like some pathetic military wife. She gave up the partnership track at her law firm for you. She was supposed to stay here, with me, with her family. 15 seconds. I've been in love with her since we were kids. The words exploded out of him like a dam bursting. Not like a brother. I've never felt like her brother. She was supposed to be mine. But then you came along with your uniform and your medals and your perfect fucking hero act. Marcus moved like lightning. One moment he was standing at the microphone. The next, Jake was on the ground, Marcus's hand wrapped around his throat. My wife, Marcus said quietly, is not property to be owned. She makes her own choices. And she chose me. Jake gasped for air, clawing at Marcus's grip. She chose wrong. That, Marcus said, releasing him suddenly so that Jake collapsed backward against the wall, is not your decision to make. Marcus straightened his dress blue jacket and returned to the microphone as if nothing had happened. Jake scrambled to his feet and fled the reception hall, leaving behind a room full of stunned wedding guests. Now, Marcus said smoothly, let me tell you about the most incredible woman I've ever known, and how lucky I am that she chose to marry me. The rest of his speech was everything I had dreamed it would be, heartfelt, funny, romantic, and absolutely perfect. but I barely heard it over the pounding of my heart and the chaos in my mind. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, my parents approached with stricken faces. "Emma, honey, we had no idea Jake felt. We never imagined he would." My mother struggled for words. "He's not really your brother," my father said quietly. "We should have told you years ago." Jake was adopted when he was 12, after his parents died. "We always encouraged you to think of him as family, but maybe we should have been more careful about boundaries." The final piece of the puzzle fell into place. Jake's increasingly possessive behavior, his resentment of my relationship with Marcus, his complete breakdown tonight. It all made a horrible kind of sense. "Where is he now?" I asked. "Gone," my mother said sadly. "He packed his things and left. Said he couldn't stay in town anymore." Later, in our honeymoon suite, Marcus gently tended to my injuries with a first aid kit he'd somehow procured. "How did you know?" I asked, as he applied antiseptic to my split lip with military precision. "The photos were obviously manipulated, but that's not what gave it away." He set down the cotton swab and looked into my eyes. "Emma, I've been sending you copies of every photo I take overseas since our second deployment. Remember? You said you wanted to feel like you were there with me." I did remember. Marcus had made good on that promise, sharing hundreds of photos from his deployments, landscapes, fellow soldiers, local customs, and yes, social events with other military families. "You sent me those exact photos 3 years ago," I continued, the memory rushing back. "I have them all in my phone." When Jake showed me the cropped versions, something felt familiar, but I was too shocked to place it. Marcus nodded grimly. "Someone with access to your photo albums could easily find pictures to manipulate. Someone who knew my deployment schedule, knew exactly which buttons to push to make you doubt everything." "He was my brother," I whispered, the words tasting bitter. "I trusted him completely." "He wasn't your brother," Marcus corrected gently. "He was a man who convinced himself he was in love with you and couldn't handle the fact that you loved someone else. That's not family. That's obsession." We spent our wedding night talking instead of celebrating, working through the trauma of Jake's betrayal and the revelation about his true feelings. Marcus held me while I cried for the loss of someone I had thought was family, for the violation of trust, for the wedding day that had been tainted by manipulation and violence. "I'm so sorry," I whispered against his chest. "I should have trusted you. I should have known." "You were in shock," he murmured into my hair. "Someone you trusted completely had just shown you what looked like proof that I was cheating. Your reaction was completely understandable. But I doubted you. Even for a moment, I doubted us." Marcus tilted my chin up to meet his eyes. "Emma, you married me anyway. You walked down that aisle even thinking I might have betrayed you because you chose to trust your heart over his lies. That's not doubt. That's courage." 6 months later, I received a letter from Jake. He was living in another state, working as a construction foreman, and had been attending therapy to address what he called his unhealthy attachment patterns. The letter was an apology, not just for the wedding day, but for years of subtle manipulation and possessive behavior that I was only now beginning to recognize. "I realize now that what I felt wasn't love," he wrote. "Love wants the other person to be happy, even if that happiness doesn't include you. What I felt was ownership, control, obsession. I'm sorry for trying to destroy your marriage, for hitting you, for betraying your trust. I'm working every day to become the kind of person who deserves forgiveness, even if I never receive it. I hope you and Marcus have the beautiful life you deserve." I never wrote back, but I kept the letter. Not as a gesture of forgiveness, but as a reminder that people are capable of change, and that recognizing toxic patterns is the first step toward healing. Marcus and I did have that beautiful life Jake had written about. We moved to his new duty station in California, where I started my own practice specializing in military family law. We bought a house with a view of the ocean, adopted a rescue dog named Charlie, and began building the future we dreamed about during all those months of separation. On our first wedding anniversary, we renewed our vows in a private ceremony on the beach. Just Marcus, me, an officiant, and 2 witnesses we'd met that morning. No family politics, no hidden agendas, no possibility of betrayal. Just 2 people who had chosen each other, choosing each other again. Any regrets about the first wedding? Marcus asked as we danced barefoot in the sand afterward. I thought about it seriously before answering. No, I said finally. Even Jake's betrayal taught us something important about trust and communication. And your response, the way you exposed his lies and protected our marriage, that showed me exactly who you are under pressure. A scary control freak with access to military intelligence resources? I laughed, pulling him closer. My husband, my partner, the person who fights for us when I can't fight for myself. The waves crashed against the shore as we danced, washing away footprints and carrying off the remnants of old hurts. We had learned that trust, once broken, could be rebuilt stronger than before. That family is chosen, not just biological, and that sometimes the worst betrayals reveal the most important truths about who truly deserves your love. Jake had tried to destroy our marriage with lies and manipulation, but in the end, he had only made it stronger. The brother who had punched me at my wedding was gone, but the Marine who had exposed him, who had fought for our love when I couldn't, was beside me, solid and real, and absolutely mine. As we watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink, I realized that this was what happily ever after actually looked like. Not a perfect fairy tale, but 2 imperfect people who had chosen to trust each other through the storms and had emerged stronger on the other side. The revenge Marcus had taken wasn't cruel or violent. It was simply the truth, presented clearly and without embellishment. Sometimes, the most devastating response to betrayal isn't retaliation, but transparency. Jake's lies had crumbled in the face of reality, and the man who had tried to destroy our marriage with fabricated evidence had ultimately destroyed only himself. Our love story hadn't been perfect, but it was real. And that, I had learned, was infinitely more valuable than any fairy tale.